Okay, so you want to own a business, you've got the savings, you've got the ambition, maybe you've even got the location picked out. And at some point, someone is going to look you dead in the eye and say, have you thought about just buying a franchise? And it sounds like the smartest thing in the world. Proven system, recognizable brand, built-in customers. It's like buying a business that already works. But here's the thing, if it already works so perfectly, why do a third of franchise owners say they'd never do it again? And why are some of the most profitable, fastest-growing small businesses in America completely independent, built from scratch with no corporate overlord, no rulebook, and no logo handed down from headquarters? By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly how the money flows in both models, what it actually costs to buy into a franchise, where those costs hide, what independent ownership really looks like on the inside financially, and which one mathematically makes more sense depending on who you are. Because the answer isn't what most people think. Let's start with the dream, because this whole conversation begins with the same image in everyone's head. You picture yourself owning a McDonald's. Gold arches, drive-through humming, fry smell, customers on autopilot because the brand does the selling for you. And that image isn't wrong, it's just incomplete. Because before you ever flip a single burger in your own McDonald's, you will have spent at minimum $1 million, and that's the cheap end. A new McDonald's location runs anywhere from $1 million to $2.3 million in total startup investment, and that's after you pay the franchise fee of $45,000 just to apply. Yes, $45,000 before you sign a lease, hire a single employee, or buy a single fryer. And McDonald's isn't even the most expensive franchise out there. A full hotel franchise like a Marriott or Hilton flag can cost anywhere from $10 to $75 million in total investment. A Chick-fil-A, on the other hand, costs just $10,000 in franchise fees, and that sounds incredible until you realize Chick-fil-A owns the restaurant, owns the equipment, and takes 50% of your pre-tax profits every single year. You're not really an owner, you're a very well-branded manager. So let's break down what franchise costs actually look like, because this is where the real education begins. There are 3 tiers of franchises, and they operate almost like completely different businesses. The first tier is your low investment franchises. Cleaning services, home care, tutoring centers. We're talking $20,000 to $100,000 in total investment. The second tier is your mid-market franchises. Fast food, fitness studios, hair salons, $100,000 to $500,000. And then there's your third tier, your full-service restaurants, hotels, large retail operations, where you're looking at $500,000 to several million dollars before the doors even open. And here's the number that almost never gets talked about in those glossy franchise brochures. The initial franchise fee, which sounds like the big payment, is actually the smallest part of what you'll spend. Think of it like this. Buying a franchise is like buying a car. The sticker price is the franchise fee. But then there's insurance, registration, maintenance, fuel, and the fact that you have to park it in the lot they tell you at the hours they set, and you can't modify it without their permission. The real cost of the car is everything that comes after the sticker. So, what comes after the sticker? Royalty fees. And this is the single most important number in any franchise agreement. Royalties are the ongoing percentage of your gross revenue, not your profit, your gross revenue, that you pay to the franchisor every single week for the entire life of your agreement. The average royalty fee across the franchise industry is between 4% and 8%. Subway charges 8%. Dunkin' charges 5.9%. And look, 4 to 8% sounds manageable until you do the math on a restaurant doing $2 million a year in revenue. At 6% royalty, you're writing a check for $120,000 a year to corporate before you've paid a single employee, before rent, before food costs, before utilities, every single year. But wait, there's more. On top of royalties, most franchisors charge a marketing or advertising fund fee, usually 1% to 4% of gross revenue. Again, of revenue, not profit. So now you're at 6 to 12% of everything you make right off the top going to someone else's bank account. This is the math that franchise brochures bury in footnotes. Now let's look at how the money actually flows in a real franchise, because this is where it gets interesting. Let's use a mid-tier fast food franchise as our model. Say you open a location that does $1.5 million a year in gross revenue, which, by the way, is around average for a quick service franchise. Your cost of goods, the food itself, runs about 30%. That's $450,000. Labor runs another 30%, $450,000. Rent and occupancy costs eat another 10%,
$150,000. Royalties and marketing fees at a combined 8%, $120,000. Utilities, insurance, repairs, miscellaneous, another 5 to 7%. You're left with roughly $90,000 to $130,000 in net profit on $1.5 million in revenue. That's a net margin of about 6 to 9%.
Now, here's where people's brains break a little. 6 to 9% sounds thin, and it is thin, but on a business that cost you $300,000 to open, a $90,000 annual profit is a 30% cash-on-cash return. That's actually excellent by investment standards. The problem is, most people don't frame it that way. They see the revenue number, $1.5 million, and think they're going to be rich. And then they see the $90,000 left over and feel cheated. You're not cheated, you just didn't understand the model. So where does the independent path look different? Here's the thing about going independent. The upside is bigger, the downside is also bigger, and the entire game changes on day one. When you open an independent business, you don't pay a franchise fee, you don't pay royalties, you don't pay into a marketing fund you don't control. Every dollar of margin you generate belongs entirely to your P&L. But you also have no brand, no proven system, no training pipeline, no corporate support line, no bulk purchasing power. You are building from zero. And that has a real cost. It just shows up differently. Instead of royalty fees, you pay it in slower customer acquisition. Instead of a marketing fund, you pay an agency or you build it yourself, which costs time, which is money. Instead of a training manual, you build culture by trial and error. Independent restaurants on average spend 18 to 24 months just getting to break even. Franchises average 8 to 12 months. That 6-month gap represents rent, payroll, and operating costs during a period where you're not yet profitable. For a mid-sized business, that delta can be $50,000 to $100,000 in additional early-stage losses.
But here's the flip side, and this is the argument that independent owners will make until they die. Margins. When you remove royalties and marketing fees from the equation, which remember can be 8 to 12% of revenue, your margin picture changes dramatically. That same $1.5 million business run independently could generate $200,000 to $250,000 in net profit instead of $90,000. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between a good job and actual wealth building. And then there's the exit. When you sell a franchise, you typically need franchisor approval. The buyer must qualify. The process can take 6 to 12 months. You may also owe a transfer fee, sometimes as high as $10,000 to $25,000 back to the franchisor just for the privilege of selling your own business. When you sell an independent business, you call the shots. You find the buyer. You negotiate. No permission required. Now, why do franchises fail? Because they do fail, and that's the part that surprises people most. The IFA, the International Franchise Association, will tell you that franchises have a success rate north of 90%, but that number has been picked apart by economists for years because the way they define success includes businesses that sold, transferred, or closed voluntarily, which isn't exactly the same as thriving. The real picture is more nuanced. About 20% of franchise locations change hands or close within the first 5 years, and the reasons almost always come down to the same 3 things. First, undercapitalization. People buy in with enough money to open, but not enough to survive the first 12 months at lower than expected revenue. The franchise model can't save you from a cash flow crisis. Second, location miscalculation. The brand draws customers, but only in the right trade area. A Subway in a mall that's dying doesn't get saved by the Subway brand. Third, the operator fit problem. Running a franchise is not entrepreneurship in the creative sense. It's operations management. It's discipline, compliance, execution. And a lot of people who dream of owning a business are actually dreaming of the creative freedom that franchising specifically does not offer. When those people buy franchises, they fight the system. And fighting the system is almost always a losing bet. On the independent side, failures happen faster and harder. 60% of independent restaurants don't make it past year 3, according to a Cornell University study. The reasons are different: brand obscurity, menu identity crisis, underpricing, poor financial controls. But the ones that survive year 3, they often outlast the franchises around them. Because by year 3, an independent owner who's still standing has usually figured out something genuinely differentiated. And differentiated businesses have pricing power. And pricing power means better margins, and better margins mean a healthier business long term. So what's the actual verdict?
Here is the honest, no-spin breakdown.
If you have limited business operations experience, access to $300,000 or more in capital, a low risk tolerance, and you want a proven, repeatable income stream, franchising can genuinely make sense. You are buying infrastructure. You are paying for it, yes, but you're getting something real in return, a faster path to profitability, a recognizable name, and a system that someone else already broke and fixed before you arrived. But if you have industry expertise, a genuine differentiated concept, a higher risk tolerance, and you're thinking long-term, we're talking 5 to 10 years, independent ownership is almost always the superior financial outcome. The math is simply better when you're not paying a royalty tax on every dollar of revenue you generate. You just have to earn your customers the hard way. The most honest metaphor I can give you, buying a franchise is like renting a really well-built house. Everything works, it looks great, the neighbors recognize it, but you'll never own the land. Going independent is like building your own house from scratch. It takes longer, it's harder, you'll make mistakes in the foundation, but when it's done, every single dollar of that equity belongs to you. And that, in the end, is the economics of owning a franchise versus going independent. Two paths to the same destination, both of them harder than they look, and both of them more rewarding than staying on the sideline.